what do you make of what we heard from Donald Trump today? Because as a business reporter, my pencil was out, my notebook was ready, and there wasn't that much business being covered.
Well, I mean, the one new thing he said was upping the ante on tariffs from saying that it could be 10% to actually as much as 20%. And then the campaign was hurrying to kind of walk that back because that was a pretty significant escalation that it didn't seem like was actually on the teleprompter. But it would hardly be the first time that, the campaign built something as a major policy address and it ended up being just, your standard Trump stump speech. I mean, there was one point where he kind of joked like, oh, this is going to be a very intellectual speech for all of you. They tell me, the polls are my advisors. They tell me that the economy is the most important thing, but I don't know about that. Like, it's not necessarily what he wants to talk about most.
But who are his advisors? Because when we're talking about policy, just take one example. No tax on Social Security, Sam. That seems like an old school Democratic type of proposal, not something you get out of Republicans. What old school Republican voters are saying, yep, that's what I'm looking for? Certainly not Wall Street.
No, and this kind of fits a pattern with Trump where he tries to outflank the left on some of these policies. Democrats, and Harris has not even actually gone as far as Trump has on saying no tax on Social Security. The predominant Democratic proposal is to expand Social Security. And so, in a way, Trump is trying to outflank her here. And he's done that on a few things, right? I mean, he got ahead of her on the no tax on tips. He's very protectionist. The tariffs, the use of tariffs is definitely not from the Republican playbook. But some of the stuff is just paper thin, right? First of all, a lot of these things will not pass. The idea that you're going to overhaul tax policy in this manner with a flick of your pen is not going to happen. You need Congress, obviously. The tariffs would be inflationary. They have a lot of opposition. But this is what Trump does, and he's artful at it to a degree, and he's trying to go into Harris's base. He's trying to make an appeal to white working class voters predominantly, and he has been somewhat successful in the past. It's a playbook he's trying to duplicate this time around.
But even if they won't pass, right? Who are these policies coming from? Because when I think about and I know it's more my lane, but when I talk about the business leaders that I speak to who say, he's crazy, he's unpredictable, but his policies really work for us. What group of Republicans, right, are pushing these kind of policies? Because they're not at all aligned with what the Republican Party has ever presented.
There's kind of been a devil's bargain here, right? I mean, on the one hand, he's always talked about these types of policies that are not traditionally conservative Republican. On the other hand, when he was in office, he slashed corporate tax cuts, slashed tax cuts across the board. Those tax cuts need to be extended. My guess is that Wall Street is cozying up to him to a degree, not everyone, but to a degree, in hopes that he continues to do across the board tax cuts, even if he pairs them with these tariffs that everyone on Wall Street and most economists say would be incredibly inflationary.
All right, Brian, we heard over and over, Trump is resetting his message. He's focusing on policy. You watched that speech. What did you hear?
Sorry, I guess I shouldn't laugh, but I heard a mess. I did not hear a focus on the economy. I think some of the media coverage that acts as if he's on message is doing a disservice to the viewers. And I think you're getting it, much more spot on here by acknowledging that, he starts talking about the economy in one sentence and then attacks Harris the next sentence. He seems physically incapable of hiding his jealousy of Kamala Harris. He was even talking about her Time magazine cover and complimenting it and wanting to know who illustrated it. I think Kamala Harris is his kryptonite, and he doesn't know what to do about it. Tomorrow he's holding another press conference, which probably won't go well for him based on what we've seen in the past. And yet he's flailing around trying to figure out how to respond now that everything's changed in this race.
Let's play a bit more of what he had to say.
Many people say that the only reason the stock market is up is because people think I am going to win. Did you ever hear that? But there was one day, a couple of weeks ago, when they weren't thinking that, and you saw what happened.
Okay, so let me get this rationale right, Isaac. The stock market went down when people were worried he wasn't going to win, and it's back up when they think he is. Okay? When the market went down for a day last week, it was about a jobs report spooking the market. It was about a yen carry trade getting unwound. It had nothing to do with Donald Trump. What do you make of this, Isaac?
Well, I mean, you're the business reporter, but for Trump, it always has to do with Donald Trump, right? I mean, when he's president and the stock market is up, that's thanks to him. And when he's not president and the stock market is up, that's also thanks to him. And when he's not president and the stock market is down, it's because he's not president. I mean, what else do you need to know?
All right. Well, his idea of how he's going to help the economy, help with inflation, he's going to slash energy and electricity prices by far more than half. But here's the thing, Sam. The U.S. right now is producing record amounts of oil this month. Should that be what Democrats are telling us? Because it's extraordinary to me that Donald Trump could even push this message about what he's going to do in terms of oil prices and oil productions, right? On the same day that Joe Biden is breaking records in terms of oil production. Sam?
Yeah, I mean, these are the rhetorical hoops that he jumps through. He did actually address the oil production being at historic levels today in his address in North Carolina. And I believe the rationale that he made, and it was hard to follow, I have to admit, was that they're only producing oil at record levels now because they want to get energy prices lower so they could win election. And then once they win the election, they will stop producing oil domestically and, invest in green energy and, wind and solar and yada, yada, yada. And, it's of the same genre of him taking credit for the stock market when it's up and blaming her when it's down. It doesn't make any logical sense. No one who follows these things would, ever say, yeah, that's a brilliant insight. But what he needs to do is he needs to just sort of sell these clear statistics, Dow being high, record oil production domestically, in a way that allows him to say this is all just sort of a joke and a facade, and that he's actually the one who could produce these things, or that it's being done because everyone's anticipating that he will be coming back to power.